Hi, I'm Lisa Leiter. In Chicago Business Today, wage theft. Crain's This Week takes an in-depth look at a growing problem in the Chicago area and nationwide, wage theft. The University of Illinois Chicago recently released a landmark survey showing that almost half the county's 310,000 low-wage workers experienced some kind of pay-related violation in the previous week. This could include skirting the minimum wage or overtime, forcing workers to do their job off the clock, or not paying them at all. Tory Moore says he's one of these workers. He says he was not paid for all of his hours when he worked at a Kankakee warehouse between 2003 and 2009 and has joined a class action lawsuit against the staffing agency Select Remedy that placed him there. Supervisors resisted his efforts to see his timesheets, and he was fired.
I think I was fired for trying to organize, trying to get people to fight for what they work for.
The company says Moore was fired for smoking marijuana on the job. Moore denies that. Worker advocates and lawyers say employers who shortchange workers rarely face consequences. Nick Theodore was the lead author of the UIC report and joined me to talk more about it. So Nick, what was the biggest surprise in the report after all of your study?
Well, for a number of years, we have been hearing from workers' rights advocates and others on the ground about the widespread violations of wage and hour laws and health and safety regulations. And so the idea with the study was to try to delve into that and to take a systematic look at the prevalence of workplace violations in the Chicago area. And I think what we were surprised was the extent to which these violations occurred. We found that 1 in 4 workers suffered a minimum wage violation in the previous week. For those workers that worked overtime, 2/3 had not received the required overtime pay and so on. So I think we were just surprised at the magnitude of these figures.
Absolutely. So which industries are the biggest offenders?
You know, it's interesting. We're not talking about the underground economy or a few rogue employers. We're really talking about some of the industries that are the largest and fastest growing industries in urban areas like Chicago. So we found violations in industries, blue collar and white collar, services and manufacturing, home health care, domestic work, security guards, janitors, a whole range of industries.
How big of a role does outsourcing play when it comes to some of the manufacturing situations?
You know, outsourcing is convenient and helpful for a number of employers. What it allows them to do is extend an arm's length relationship with some of their core workforce. And I do think that outsourcing has provided cover for some unscrupulous employers to break the law without the parent company, the one that's doing the outsourcing, necessarily knowing. And I think certainly when you look at janitorial work, for instance, security guards, these are all outsourced occupations. And oftentimes the parent employer may not know the extent of the problem.
Sure, and obviously the biggest impact here is that the workers are not getting their money. But there is a broader impact on the economy, right?
Sure, I mean, this certainly is affecting individual workers and their families. But as those impacts, what they're really doing is not just robbing that household of consumer spending, but the communities in which they live, the city of Chicago and Cook County, which does need the tax revenue from that spending. It's really pulling consumer spending out of communities, out of the city, and out of the country, out of the county, at a time when we desperately need it.
Sure. One study showed that for those workers who do sue and win their cases, there's often a little penalty on the company. They may just have to frankly pay the wages that may have been lost. What do you make of that?
I think one of the problems that we've had is the penalties have both been too weak and not enforced sufficiently. So I know it's a difficult fiscal climate in Illinois, as it is in many other states, but we have to look at the ability of our government agencies to fulfill their jobs and make sure that our core labor standards are not being violated on a routine basis.
What do you think it's going to take to have this issue be resolved?
Well, again, it seems like the tide is moving in the other direction, and most of the studies that we're seeing report a rise in the non-payment of wages and other violations. So I think it's going to really take a commitment at the federal level with the U.S. Department of Labor, the state level, and then working with some of the community organizations, the worker centers and workers' rights organizations that are on the ground every day seeing these issues. There's really a need for coordination between government enforcement and the nonprofit work that's occurring to make sure that we're maintaining a floor under wages and working conditions in the Chicago area.
Okay, Nick, well, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
A new law signed by Governor Pat Quinn this summer increases penalties for wage theft and streamlines enforcement. It also allows the Labor Department to issue its own binding rulings in cases where the claim is less than $3,000. Well, that's this edition of Chicago Business Today. For more on this story, be sure to check out this week's print edition of Crain's and chicagobusiness.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.